Defending your place of refuge is a necessity, though some Christians may have a problem with this. But when you look at Jesus, he never prohibited self-defense, and in fact he told his disciples to bring the sword. When looking at different weapon types, it doesn't take a whole lot of imagination to figure out what may be needed. Also, I would recommend considering more silent weapons in your armament, which would be of greater and greater benefit as the end approaches, where privacy is paramount. If your place of refuge does not have an adequate water supply source, then you definitely would need to consider a well, and early on in the process, so you won't draw undue attention to the area. If a well is installed, it should have a manual backup system just in case your energy sources are compromised. Now, a good alternative, if you do have an adequate water supply, is a Berkeley water filtration system, which can filter out pond water or rainwater. Of course, you would need to consider adding bleach or heating the water if it was obtained from a pond. Energy sources can of course be stored at your location, and oftentimes they would be put in drums, 50 gallons or more of gas or diesel. But one must remember that diesel would stay the longest, and you would need to add either stable or other additives to either. Also, liquid propane can be used for long-term energy storage and has the advantage in that it will not decay over time. But the downside with this is the leakage potential and secondary explosion. The other issue is that if you need over 200 gallons, it would have to be transported by an outside source, and most people would want either a 500 or 1,000 gallon container. So if you were to use LP, you would want to have it placed early on in the process, probably when you would have your well established. Now, the other issues with either gas, diesel, or LP is that you would want to have it far enough away from the living quarters that it wouldn't be an issue. Now, for these energy sources, you would definitely need to have generators to convert it over to electricity, and I would highly recommend, if you're going with gas or LP, to consider a Honda 2000 AU generator, which would be extremely quiet and efficient. It is no noisier than two people talking, and it can have a propane conversion kit added aftermarket. Diesel generators can be used and do have a benefit over a straight gas generator in that they have lower maintenance, and diesel can be stored for a longer period of time, but they're twice as expensive. Now, no matter what generator type you use, if you get above 5,000 kilowatt hours, you're talking about a noisy device that would need to have some sort of muffler system or be buried underground. If you do bury it underground, you have to have enough ventilation and usually a secondary chamber in which the muffler exhaust goes in. Solar power could be used at your site and would be quiet and safe, but is extremely expensive if you were using it to power any appliances. This would also require multiple panels, which would leave a large footprint overhead, which would be less advisable. In your living areas, temperature control is very important, and the earth can be your friend. Now, digging 6 foot underground can provide optimal temperature year-round in most areas. If you buy shipping containers from China, they can be obtained at a cost-efficient price and will provide fairly decent living quarters, but they need to be adequately ventilated. You can rent a backhoe with an evacuator, which can assist in burying the containers underground. It's important to put railroad ties on the tops and the sides of the containers, and put 3/4 inch plywood over top of this so that it would ensure that the walls do not cave in. The container can be moved from the original drop-off position to a more remote location within your property by using the front loader to lift one end of the container and placing wooden posts underneath, and then taking one or two trucks with chains on the opposite end of the container to pull the container as it's being lifted by the front loader on the opposite side. It's amazing how much distance the container can be moved using this technique. If your living quarters is above ground, a potbelly stove is a very important asset and will serve a dual purpose of both cooking and will provide heating during the winter months. But don't forget an adequate supply of wood, and consider log splitting devices in addition to the standard axe. Septic systems can be built very cheap and can be found at many how-to-do sites on the internet. The toilets can be either above or below ground, but the leaching beds have to be lower than the level of the toilet. Of course, plenty of toilet paper is a must, as well as personal hygiene products. Considering the close living quarter arrangement in a place of refuge, hygiene would be of utmost importance in preventing the spread of infectious disease. A very cost-efficient outdoor shower can be built by creating a wood platform on which you would place black plastic or metal barrels, which would intermittently be filled with water. The sun's energy would be absorbed then through these containers, and you could connect a hose to a shower. Camouflage clothing as well as various camping accessories would be very important, as well as first aid kits and basic medical supplies. Having a doctor or a medical type in your group could be a real asset. Also, obtaining medications from a bulk order pharmacy could be very important in preventing someone dying from a simple strep throat infection. You may find it important to know that a recent study on medication expiration dates shows that most medications last many years past their expiration dates, but they just lose a little bit of potency over the years. There is an exception to some drug classes, such as the tetracycline medications, but I would think twice about throwing out some of your old prescriptions. With the possibility of a financial collapse or the bank's temporary closing, it would be very important to have adequate cash reserves as well as gold and silver, but I would make sure they're stored outside your home and in a secure location. Having practice stays at the place of refuge with your entire group before the time of crisis can be very beneficial in working out problems ahead of time. With any end time preparations, balance is the issue. One must remember that your individual walk with Jesus is what's most important. You can do all the planning you want, but if you're not walking close with God, what good is it? One must also remember that evangelism and charity should not take a back seat to these other pursuits. We are to evangelize to the end of the ages, as the distress of these end times will be greater than ever before. It's important that we have the spiritual discernment. Though the general calling for most end-time saints will be to flee Babylon, God will give specific calling to certain individuals, even the discerning saints, to be martyrs for the faith. So it's so critically important that we be sold out to Christ, that we be willing to do anything for the name of Jesus, and love Him with all our heart, soul, strength, and might. Now, according to Daniel's last vision, it would be my recommendation to head for your place of refuge during the time of the next serious Middle East war, where Israel's victory is questionable. One must remember that many will fall from the western coastlands, but this will occur after Israel's defeat and after the king of the north establishes himself in the Holy Land. I hope this information has been insightful and practical. I pray that you are one of the wise and discerning saints of the end times, that you stay strong to the end with no compromise, whatever the cost.